Within the last 2 months, much has happened. Took a united front to ensure public safety, and my colleagues in the EOC, all of them, they'll come together to work on this, but also the province of British Columbia for their outstanding work, and the wildfire crews, who, without their help, we couldn't have to demobilize these 2 million sandbags. We'll get into that in a minute. But we protected public infrastructure, and we kept our cities safe.
So just to recap, 2 million sandbags were deployed by our, primarily our wildfire crews, some of our paid-on-call firefighters and municipal staff. So we've got 5 kilometers plus of the tiger dams or the water bladders out there. Lots of gabion baskets, 33 kilometers of sandbag walls. So we were out for a boat ride last week and looked at some of these walls and the enormous project that we have ahead here to deal with the sandbags and getting them out. 160 wildfire staff were here at one point in time. 40,000 person hours, so a huge undertaking. And again, thanks to the province, they've been instrumental in making this happen. So we peaked back on the 4th in Kalamalka Lake, June 4th, and Okanagan Lake on the 9th of June. So we didn't reach our 343.5, which was projected, so we were just shy of that, but we were definitely at historic levels. So the cleanup is said it's going to take 150 to 200% of what it took to put these things up. So there's a lot of work here. So we've already started the removal of the protection, flood protection measures. So some of the tiger dams have come down from the beaches, sandbags as well. So this is our staged approach. We have a stage 1 and stage 2. We're in stage 1 right now. So the interim kind of removals. This, due to the water still being high, we're above our 1990 and 97 levels. So we still are we still are protecting areas with our flood protection measures. So we're doing what we can to remove what's out there where it's safe and where we're not going to run into problems with erosion on the forefront or the foreshore. And some of the docks that have managed to survive some of our wind events, we want to ensure that some of these areas are protected moving forward. So this stage 1 that we're in now, we're asking the public, the homeowners that live on the water, if they can start moving their sandbags to the roadside or beach accesses to help us get rid of some of these sandbags as the water is still high. So after that's complete and we feel that it's safe to start tearing down completely, then we'll move to stage 2, which is where our crews, supported by the province, will go into backyards and start removing these flood protection measures. So flood protection is temporary. So all of the sandbags and gabions and tiger dams and everything that we put out needs to be removed. And also important is that the sand, we don't want the sand dumped into the creeks, into the lake, into the wetlands. That sand is being hauled off to gravel pits and will be utilized by some of our municipalities in their winter road maintenance. So a lot of the sand is going to be reused. The burlap bags we are able to compost those, so the Glenmore landfill will do that. And then the white poly bags that you see out there, they'll be landfilled as well. So as I mentioned, we're in stage 1, hopefully moving to stage 2 soon. We're going to probably start up in Lake Country because Kalamalka Lake and Wood Lake and those areas, the water seems to be dropping quicker there. So we'll make sure that we inform the public through the webpage and the mapping that we have there, as well as media, letting them know that we're going to be in these certain neighborhoods for the next week or so, removing some of these flood measures. So wait for those notifications. So I just want to speak about boating, respectful boating. So we've posted guidelines and provided a map, spoken to our partners to the north, the Regional District, Vernon, Coldstream, and to the south, Summerland, Penticton, and the RDOS, to ensure that we have a valley-wide, Okanagan Lake-wide, Kalamalka Lake, Wood Lake boating message that there are sensitive areas, sensitive shorelines. So the areas that we have on our map, and you can look at that map on the website as well. We have a no-wake area, so we're asking people to generate no wake with their boat, but also a low wake area, which is keeping your wake below 30 centimeters. And as we get closer to full pool, which is hopefully the end of July, then we can look at updating our respectful boating and our mapping to let folks know that we can move into other areas.
We're asking people to start peeling back some of the top layers of their sandbags and bringing them out to the road, but to keep about a 60 centimeter buffer. So that's to still for the wave action if there are some wave events. So to not take everything down yet in that first stage. So the debris plan is we've had a huge amount of woody debris and docks and garbage and barrels and all kinds of stuff floating around the lake this spring, as you're probably aware. We normally get some freshet, some woody debris every spring, but this is an extraordinary event and really high volumes out there, and people have been asking us lots of questions about, what do we do and how are we going to get rid of all this stuff. So again, thanks to support from the province, we've had lots of discussions about supporting cleaning up the lake, and the province has announced to us that they'll fund all the costs for removal of man-made debris from public land. So that's things like the barrels and the garbage and things that are coming ashore, as well as some of the orphaned docks that are coming ashore. So just to be clear on that, if somebody has a private dock and it's their dock and they want to take it away or replace it, that's still their responsibility. But where there are pieces of docks or this types of material that's washing up and nobody really knows who it belongs to, that's what we'll be looking after and helping to manage. The removal of smaller woody debris won't be funded, so like natural woody debris, like smaller pieces and branches and those, there is quite a bit of material out there that'll still be up to the adjacent owners to deal with. And we do have, a few options in terms of disposal. If where possible, small pieces can be put in yard waste bins, but of course we know a lot of people have larger volumes. They can take things to the landfill. If it meets the definition of yard waste, there's no charge for that. We currently have some contractors out there working on the lake right now with barges, and they are doing some of the cleanup for us. They've started in the areas where there is public land and where the risk of erosion is less. So we've, and the reason for that is that we don't want to take away all the debris where it might still be providing some protection from waves. So we've started in those areas where there is a lower risk. And we think that they're actually going to clean up most of the public foreshore areas probably within the next day or two. And then we're asking people to stay tuned as to how we roll it out with other public areas, in front of private properties, but still on the public domain, how we're going to roll that out and help take away some of those orphan pieces of docks and garbage. But I expect that will probably start within the next week or two. So at this point, we do have a little bit of data just from some oblique photos that were taken of these areas that, there's roughly over 360 pieces of docks that we've kind of cataloged floating around in front of different properties, about 200 large pieces of woody debris. And of course, then there's the barrels and other pieces of stuff that's floating around. So it is quite a bit of material. It's going to take a while to clean up, and as I said, we'll try to roll it out as the water recedes and where we feel it's safe to do so.
We have very good oblique air photos that was just flown. Now I know these things are going to move, but they're picking up a lot of the debris that's there, and they're about as high quality as well as when the contractors are actually in areas. If they spot those, and that's going to be the first line of defense. Afterwards, I think people calling in and if they see it. But I think you raise a good point that there could be hazards out there that are going to be undetectable. They may have drifted to the middle of the lake. Most of our action and most of our focus is actually on the shoreline, although I believe the province did do a flyover of the whole lake to try to see if they could spot debris that was more in the middle and drifting. So I think for now, exercising extreme caution on the lake is still the best advice we can give anyone.
It's a common known out there. There's a lot of illegal structures out there. Before people rebuild, they need to have a license document in place. And before that license document is approved, it has to be legal, obviously, and so we'll be making sure the documents are in place. We will have some people monitoring the building of the docks as far as patrols, probably in August sometime. So educating and letting people know the rules of what we need to do.
The Ministry of Forests and Lands is responsible for the docks that sit on the foreshore or out into the lake. Tell us a little bit about what we can expect going forward from here after all these docks have been damaged.
It depends, Tim, on the amount of damage, and we really do feel for those folks who've experienced some pretty significant damage on the lake. Going forward, for those folks who have experienced catastrophic dock damage in that their dock's been completely wiped out, the process is really, really quick. And from a tendering perspective or a permitting perspective, an application is made to rebuild your dock. There's rules, standards on the maximum sizes, lengths, all that type of stuff. It's a very quick process to get an approval. Then you have to get in line with the dock builder and find someone who can actually put the dock in for you. That's going to be a bit of the wait, unfortunately, for folks. If your dock is what we call an old historic or non-conforming dock and there's issues with it, it was built to the standards of the day, say in 2005, but doesn't meet our standards today, we're going to have a bit of a closer look at it and see what we're going to authorize you to rebuild.
So are you guys going to be extensively involved in the process of this rebuilding and replacing kind of thing, and making sure that they're licensed and they're up to snuff in terms of allowing access to the foreshore?
Absolutely. Access issues have become quite an issue, especially in the Kelowna area, and there is an expectation that docks built that survived or docks that are built new will provide the ability for people to move along the beach. So we will be monitoring the construction efforts, and there is a fairly robust compliance and enforcement program that will be monitoring activities on the lakes this summer as well. Largely educational, but it will move towards enforcement if we have to go there.
I think enforcement's been one area where people have sort of questioned the provincial government, why aren't they enforcing these kind of rules? But it's not as easy as it sounds all the time. People do make adjustments to docks and that kind of thing. Maybe explain that for us.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, our applications come in, designs come in, and they do show that there's going to be stairs there, and our audits show in many cases the stairs are there, but it's hard to monitor individuals on a week-by-week basis, and the stairs disappear or something happens and they don't end up getting put back. So it is a significant resource issue to be constantly looking for things like stairways. We do catch them. Neighbors certainly are a key component in this, and people raising the issue and bringing it to our attention certainly helps bring our attention to it.
Does this situation right now with so many people losing their docks give you that opportunity to really get ahead of the game in that regard?
I think so. I think what we're going to see, especially in the Kelowna beach area, from say the bridge down to Mission Creek, significant rebuilds, unfortunately, for a lot of folks, and as part of that, maintaining access is a legal requirement, so we will be monitoring that.
So I don't think the actual response and anything could have changed there. But are there ways? I mean, we've talked about it. Are there ways to look at having more sensors in more locations and those types of things? Certainly, those things are the kinds of things we could talk about in the future. Still very complex. I'm not sure. This event. We've had number of years of cool weather as well. So we had groundwater issues that was also making it very unpredictable. So I think there's things we could look at. I think one of the great things that I noticed, having sweat through 24 hours of Mission Creek, was that the work we had done to naturalize Mission Creek actually worked pretty well, right? And so now the question is, in the future, in the years to come, how do we deal with Mission Creek? I don't think it was ever constructed to be a flood attenuation dike, so are there ways to improve a bit of that? But I look at this as wildfires, as I said. A number of years ago, we get one big wildfire every 5 years. Now we get 3 little ones a year, and every once in a while a big one. And so I think there is some patterns that are changing. And so maybe, as you've suggested, more sensors or more ability to measure might be helpful.
As part of the Okanagan Lake regulation system, we do scrutinize the snow pillows, and we continue to do that. And after every event like this, there will be an internal review for sure on what decisions were made and where we sat with that and improvements for future.
We're not going to hit full pool till the end of July. If you walk along the foreshore, there's a lot of sandbags and there's a lot of work to be done. So Full recovery, if we have to go out, water drops, do all of our assessments, all the sandbags, all this cleaned up, and we're going to be well into August at least. There's definitely going to be lingering things that'll probably bug us for some time, but yeah, optimistically mid-August, depending on how this removal process goes.
And again, when we do assessments, if it's on the waterfront, it could be some time before we actually get back in to actually change it. So it could be well into even next year where some of the work, some of the infrastructure may not be able to be repaired until then. So August, optimistically, for most of the things you'll see, probably well into this fall for everything.
I review the wind and wave processes on the lake, and I can come up with a design wave in most cases. In this case, though, we didn't have time for doing that kind of analysis. So in this case, what I was doing is taking a look at how the waves on the lake from different directions would impact various shorelines along the lake, and looking into the flood mitigation structures that they had and trying to reinforce those for undermining from wave processes as well.
Is that what you're finding in a lot of cases? The waves are getting underneath the barriers?
Where you have a vertical wall of some kind, so the gabions, for example, that are vertical, the wave reflects off that, and it actually can amplify the scour potential there, right? So where you have people with concrete walls, for example, along the lake, they amplify. They do the same thing. So vertical walls everywhere. We're finding there's been a lot of undermining. So people along the lake, stratas, you name it, that have these vertical concrete walls are finding that they are now undermined, and they're sometimes even losing land in behind the wall because it's just scoured out completely below the wall.
Now, we had several storms, one big one, I guess. Maybe talk about the impact that they had on the defenses that we've had set up here.
Again, it comes down mostly to undermining. So, when you have a storm, it's a wind-generated storm, and you do get a bit of a storm surge, which is where you get a little bit, your water level appears to be a little bit higher as the waves all build up on one side of the lake, and then of course you have the waves on top of that. So if you have a 4-foot wave, then 2 feet of that is up above, and so above the water level, so that can still crash over as well. So you can have them flooding in behind still if the structures are not tall enough. Or you can have a situation where it can knock over the structures. And walls again, especially when the water's so high, because the wave gets behind it, you then get this dynamic force on the wall in both directions, which can kind of work the wall into a situation of collapse.
What about going forward now? The lake's come down a bit and everything, but it's still pretty high. Wave action is still going to be a concern for the next 2 or 3 weeks by the sounds of it.
Yes, for sure. We're still at really, really high lake levels. The specific numbers are still a bit fuzzy, honestly. But the lake levels that we're at, we haven't recorded them this high. And so I do want people to understand that, this isn't just, our average high water. We're so far from being at the average high water. We're still in a really bad flood situation. And at a level this high, the waves are still able to get to parts of the shoreline or docks or structures that they wouldn't normally impact. And especially as well, because it's so high, there's more depth. So when the water is lower, only a smaller wave could get up to that structure. But when the water is so deep, you can now allow a larger wave, which carries more energy, to get up to the structure as well.
Talk about from a West Kelowna perspective, I guess, and the damage you guys received here. You see this park here, the water got pretty high here.
Well, this is a regional park in here, and I guess there's a debate on whether this is groundwater coming up through the ground or the water came in off the water. We certainly, when the creek overflowed, Powers Creek, took a fair bit of damage down Galatly Road here, and also, in terms of infrastructure, we have 2 bridges that received some damage. The one on Shannon Lake that was slated to be repaired this year anyway, and the one on Powers Creek that's slated to be repaired in the next couple of years, but both are okay at this point. The big one in terms of damage was Galatly Road going up to 97, where the bank was undercut by Smith Creek, and we started to get slope failure, cracking in the pavement as it was sloughing down. And the works to repair that are just gearing up right now. We've got equipment in place, and hopefully within the next month or so that will be back to normal, and the people who live on Carroll and Wint roads that are taking a a traffic diversion will be relieved by that. But certainly down in Green Bay, it's been touch and go down there. Much of it is under the lake level, but protected by a dike. I was down there with then Premier Clark and a sandbag wall up to here, and the water right there beside us. We should have been standing in the water. The resident had a little pump running, taking it out. Our staff built a dam on the Green Bay Canal on the uphill side of the Green Bay Landing Bridge and then pumped water out. That protected some 40 mobile homes. So really heroic efforts there. We had a Friday evening about 3 weeks ago or a month ago over on Whitworth that was kind of World War III with high winds coming from the south that started breaking docks loose, crashing into other docks, breaking them loose, taking down sandbag walls. All the resources that we had out in the field that night from Green Bay, Pritchard, Casa Loma, anywhere else, they were all moved over here to start to catch those dikes as they went down and replace them. And then we backfilled with the BC wildfire guys who were in the camp at the other locations and so on. So really heroic and brilliant efforts by staff here in West Kelowna, our firefighters, our civic staff, and the BC wildfire guys. We couldn't have done it without them. We were under the direction the whole time of the EOC, which is staff from all of the municipalities, so we're certainly grateful from Kelowna, Peachland, and the regional district, and Lake Country, and WFN was in there who helped us out in so many ways.
Now you brought up maybe some kind of a review or something after this to look at maybe in the future of preventing this type of issue happening again.
Well, I think it's more not only prevention. Is there something we could have done differently? Probably not in terms of the dam from what I'm looking at and when the snowpack built in very late winter, but did we have the right measuring system in place for snowpack? Are we seeing patterns climate change wise with later the precipitation coming later in the winter that maybe we should anticipate differently? There's a risk there that we could go into drought if we let too much go. But also our response, was it good? Were there things that could have been done differently? The response of the OC and everybody on the lake for that matter. I know in the case of West Kelowna, the response that we did, while it was great, has put us seriously behind the 8 ball in terms of all of the other projects that we were going to do this year, and some will be deferred to another year, and some are just going to start real late. If you weren't near the water, if you didn't live near the water or come down near the water, you didn't realize what was going on. And I had complaints for the duration of this about, grass not being cut or weeds not being taken care of in parks and things like that. Well, our staff were busy with sandbags and other mitigation efforts. Sorry, but this is what we had to do. So I think all in all it went well, but what's our capacity as municipalities and First Nations to address these kinds of things if they're more common?